Hi there, Megan Thompson here with Megan Thompson Coaching, and we have Autumn Brennan, our teen expert as well. Welcome, Autumn.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Megan.
Yes. So today we are here to talk about 3 traps that you, as a parent of a highly sensitive child, can fall into if you're working on breaking out of the meltdown cycle with a spouse or co-parent. How consistency can fall apart, what challenges you need to avoid. And this is part 1 of a 2-part series. Today, we're going to talk about parenting children ages 14 and under. And that's 8th grade and under for those of you who are noticing the grades here. And then part 2, we'll talk about this in our next show related to teenagers, those in high school. So what we're going to cover today in breaking out of this pattern, right? Let's talk about first the pattern that we're talking about. Meltdowns on a daily basis, regularly yelling, kicking, screaming, throwing things, running away, hiding under the bed, hiding in closets, isolating, and refusing or shutting down, okay? If your child is engaging in any of these behaviors on a regular basis, that might mean daily, multiple times a day, or multiple times a week, then these are symptoms of the meltdown cycle. Your sensitive child was not put on this earth to be miserable. And if your child is exhibiting this behavior consistently for 2 weeks or more, then you have a meltdown cycle on your hands and you need to be paying attention. This is our specialty here at MTC. We've helped parents, hundreds of parents at this point, through the coaching systems that we apply, break out of this pattern. And some parents are able to do that in as little as 8 weeks. So let's go ahead and notice, where parents get stuck, right? You're trying to do this and breaking out of this pattern by yourself, right? Or on your own. One of the things that parents notice is that they need to be shifting how they think about the problem, right? Because if you're learning about how to use, say, for example, gentle parenting strategies, or in some way, shape, or form, stop using traditional parenting because you realize that timeouts don't work and sticker charts don't work and threatening doesn't work and punishments and groundings don't work. The first thing we see is the parents will start to read books, digest everything on Google and observe and realize that the change starts with you, right? So parent number 1 starts doing all the research, right? And starts realizing that you need to change the dynamic. And so let's talk about one of the things that parents, especially the one who's steering the ship, if you will. This is parent number 1 in some parents' households. You might be doing this solo first before you start to relay this information to your spouse or your co-parent. And we have some mindset shifts that parents are making, or some perspective changes that they're making when they dive down this rabbit hole. So let's talk about this. Autumn, what do you see?
Yeah. So one of the things that I see that comes up for parents is that they may do a really great job at listening to their gut, noticing something's wrong, something's not right here. What I'm currently doing as a parent isn't working. This is not when I envisioned having a family, when I envisioned having kids. This was not the vision. Not only that, but I'm watching my child move day to day in a way that just is very apparently miserable, not just for them, but maybe for a sibling. And if I'm being honest, kind of for myself, right? Because I'm responding to these meltdowns that are happening cyclically, right? You just said if something's happening for more than 2 weeks, a meltdown a day. Well, we've been working with parents that, right, this has been happening for years where they're having a meltdown or more a day, right? And so you do get to that place, and we've seen this with many of our parents, that gut instinct to say, I need to do something different translates to, let me grab some books, let me start to scour the internet. What am I finding that can be helpful? And they've got a lot of motivation, right? And it's coming from a genuine place of I want to learn all the things. I want to know how to make this shift. And this momentum, this energy, this hope that they've started to connect with is going to propel them into starting to make some real changes, right? Changes that they're seeing in some of these books or through some of these programs. Here's the problem. What happens, right, when that initial momentum starts to fade, or some of these changes that you're starting to make, they sound really great at first. I can do this. I've got the energy. I've got the momentum. But when you start to become a little confused because you don't have anybody that is step-by-step guiding you, right? Or you don't have anybody that you're talking about the progress that you're making, or that you can circle back around to, it starts to become a little bit more challenging to hold on to these mindset shifts or these shifts in parenting practices that you're making, right? Doubt. Really, at the end of the day, it's that doubt, it's that fear, it's that worry. Is this really what I'm supposed to be doing? And if this is not really what I'm supposed to be doing, I'm tired. I don't want to keep doing it. And so we start to see that mindset shift backwards.
Yes. And so when this starts to happen, you start to bring your partner into the dynamic. Okay, honey, it's time for us to be working together on this. I'm starting to feel a little exhausted. Your way isn't working either. We need to be on the same page. Let's make sure that the strategies that I see are in the home that are working, right? I'm getting my child to calm down. I'm helping them. Maybe, you might have read in a book that you need to validate your child. You need to communicate more about emotions. You need to support them in managing the reason why they're freaking out, rather than just telling them that everything is going to be okay, right? And doing that is tiring when you're trying to do it all yourself. So you try to, share the wealth, spread the responsibility. Here, honey, this is what we need to be doing. I need you to talk to the kid like this. And when I do this on my own, when I'm at the top of my game, he's able to chill. And so I need you to be doing the same thing that I'm doing. And one thing that we see parents, get stuck on, right, is when the second parent starts to implement this strategy, they start using it more like a tactic. Okay. And so what do I mean by that? A tactic is something that you throw at the wall and see what sticks. And so what you're forgetting is the systems that are in place behind that tactic. The system, including mindset support, including the shift of perspective of how you view your child and what they're capable of, and how you think that they are making decisions. Are they doing it on purpose, or are they doing it because they are struggling and they're missing some skills, right? And so for the parent who has done all kinds of research, right, you have been looking at this over and over and over again, and you're bringing your spouse or co-parent up to speed and saying, I need you to talk to the kid like this. Often we see parents are missing the fact that they did all this mindset work while they were researching for, 30, 60 days before they even started changing how they parent. And how they interact with the child. And so this is trap number one, forgetting the foundation. We see this so frequently for parents in breaking out of the pattern of the meltdown cycle. It has to start first with you. And this is one of the things that we drill home with our clients. Your perspective of what your kid is capable of, how your child is thinking about a problem, how your child is seeing and experiencing the world, has to be on point and directly focused on how the highly sensitive child's brain works. And the highly sensitive brain works completely differently, very differently to the non-highly sensitive person. And without all that information, without all that perspective, then what you're going to do is you're going to say the right things, okay, and teach the right things to your spouse or co-parent. And what happens is that they end up falling flat. Why? We talk about this a lot. The urgency, the delivery is off, the perception is off. There's a lot going on behind the scenes in your own mind when you're delivering these perspectives. And so this is really important because that contributes to your level of exhaustion. Which brings me to point number 2. Okay, trap number 2 is when you're struggling to assess progress. So Autumn, you were mentioning this earlier, right? That you can, when you're throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks, You're trying a lot of things. You read 3 books. You're trying, a piece from this book, a piece from this book, a piece from this mommy blogger article. And you're like, oh yeah, that sounds like a good thing that my kid might do. And how to help my kid get their homework done, how to help my kid go to soccer practice, how to help my kid go to, go make friends in the park, all these little tactics, and you cherry picking them in that respect puts you in a position of again, creating this splatter casting approach.
Yeah.
What happens when you're chomping at the bit trying to solve it like that?
Yeah. That's that fatigue that I was talking about, right? Like when the human body doesn't see, right, results of some kind, right, it doesn't experience some pleasure or some positive emotion associated with something that has been putting a lot of energy towards, it's going to start to want to back away from that, or it's going to start to feel helpless, right? Whenever you just take a second just to notice, call it that emotion of helplessness, or think about something that's been frustrating you a lot, you start to get smaller, right? You start to feel heavier. You're not jumping with that joy, that motivation that maybe drove you to start to pick up some of these books, or to start to dive into learning this information, and then, using it with your children, extending it to your other parent. And it starts to become something that I'm implementing, but I'm becoming more unsure of. Again, that doubt, because there's at that point, without a system, you used the word system earlier, Megan, and that's really fantastic, because that's what a system does. A system helps to guide you to understand what it is that you're looking for, what it is that you're seeing, right? And it helps you to notice pieces of progress that an expert might notice, but that you, as a parent that isn't an expert in child development or in parenting and HSE, right? At the end of the day, because there's plenty of psychologists that we work with, individuals that have been in a helping profession or an educator's role for years and years and years, and they're trying to use strategies or tactics that may work well with children that aren't HSEs, and they're just experiencing frustration because here I go, I'm trying to use this with my highly sensitive child, and I'm not seeing progress in the same way that I would with another child. And that's generating that frustration. It might even start to generate parental conflict, right? Between you and your co-parent, not being able to see eye to eye on what it is that maybe you have learned and you're trying to implement, and what you have taught them and they're trying to implement, right? And both of you have an idea of what that looks like, but it's your idea, it's your perspective, and that might not match up. Just like when you're trying to teach your co-parent how to use some of these strategies, you might notice that they have a different learning style, and they're not learning the information or implementing it the same way that you are, right? But really, at the end of the day, that comes back around to that progress that you're seeing or not seeing. So having a system that's going to tell you, this is what you're going to implement at this point, and this is what you are likely going to see as a progression, it's going to be really helpful to continue to motivate you to use your skills as a parent, not necessarily your child using skills, but maybe they are, maybe that's what you're teaching them, right? But it's going to help to motivate you. I'm doing this right. I want to keep doing more of this. I'm starting to see this progress. Without that system, how do you know?
Yeah. And this is really important, because when we think about the challenges of working on this on your own and trying to shift the perspective of breaking down your child's skill gaps and teaching them how to feel their emotions and let them go, acknowledge that emotions are normal, communicate that to other people, trusted adults, right? And then do that instead of freaking out, instead of raising the bar with extreme behavior reactions. The shifts that are necessary in order to make all of this happen need to happen in a certain order and in a certain depth in order to see consistent progress. But it also requires neutral support to look above the problem, right? And so if it's difficult for you to have an objective perspective of your child, I mean, hi, who's a parent that can do that really well and effectively, right? Then you'll get trapped in some of this, in some of these challenges. And one of the things that's important when you think about changing the way that your child shows up in the world, we're talking about transformation. We're talking about being able to transform how they take in challenges and how they respond to them. That's a different, that's not just skill sets, that's a personality shift. And when I say that a little tongue in cheek, because we always tell our clients that if you perceive your child to be rigid, if you perceive your child to be strong-willed, if you perceive your child to be easily frustrated, that's not their personality. That's a symptom of the meltdown cycle. Okay. So it's really important for you to get that. And I'm just going to park that for another show, I'm sure. But right now, what we're talking about is when you're looking at changing how your child presents themselves in the world, how they function in the world, right? How they show their true self, which is the functional capacity of managing frustration and creatively solving problems on a day-to-day basis, or any other negative emotion, disappointment, sadness, etc. Then the focus in shifting that, your child is going to experience change, right? And change is difficult for highly sensitive kids without the skill to manage change. So you're going to have some fits and starts. We see a lot of parents who are skeptical that their child can change because they've been trying so long to help their child change. But guess what? Once you finally get your spouse and co-parent on board to make some changes, what is that? A change. So it's really important for you to be able to tell the difference between a change that is a good change, and your child is going to take some time to level out to that, right?
Right.
Or what your spouse or co-parent who has not been doing this for as long as you have might say, which is, this doesn't work for me. It just made it worse. It only works for you because you have all the time in the world to help them, or because you talk to them differently, or because you coddle them, right? Because this is such an important topic when we look at it from the bigger picture of what we also talk about in other shows, that perspective of moving from passivity to pressuring, and the pendulum that you swing. And so usually we have the parent who is trying more effective strategies for highly sensitive kids on their own tend to move into this protecting component and saving their child from their emotions, because the pressuring is painful to watch, right? And when you're in that experience, you can really feel for your child, and you might feel like you get your child differently, understand your child more intuitively or more naturally than your spouse or co-parent. And when this creates arguments, it puts you in a position to overperform, which leads to enablement. And you know it. I mean, you know it as a parent that you are enabling your child and you're treating them as fragile. You hear that in your gut. To overcompensate for the suck it up, get it together, this is ridiculous, I've told you this a million times, right? So as soon as you get your co-parent on board of, all right, fine, you know what, I'll try it your way. I mean, nothing's been working anyways, right? We've got this change reaction. And then what? What do we do? Right. So it's really hard to assess progress without support and being able to see this. You have to follow a system that has worked repeatedly with multiple people in different facets in order to know what is a reaction to change, what is a healthy reaction to change for highly sensitive kids stuck in the meltdown cycle, aka an expected reaction to change. And then what is a clear mismatch in parenting strategy, right? Parenting tactics. And so we see so often that parents will say, well, that strategy doesn't work for my kid because they freaked out when I used it.
Right.
Well, when your kid was 2 and you put the seatbelt on, did you decide not to put seatbelt on your kid?
Right.
All right. So we have to take a bigger look at this and really understand the difference between an ineffective strategy or ineffective delivery or ineffective timing of the strategy. And that's critical. So we're going into, the next piece, which is, how do you teach your spouse or co-parent? I mean, holy smoly. This is trap number 3, is perceiving that your spouse or co-parent learns the same way that you do.
So I'm going to speak to this because working as a coach and working, supporting the coaches at MTC, this is something that comes up for us all of the time and that we gladly work with our families on because it doesn't, regardless of how positive your relationship is, even while you're under stress from parenting a highly sensitive child, right? And there may be some tension there because of that. So if anything, it might not be as positive as it has been in the past, when you're coming to us or when you are seeking out support, right, in parenting. The idea, though, that different people have different learning styles, right? I think on a cognitive level, we can all relate to that, or we can notice that, that's normal. But when you're thinking about it, as far as teaching your co-parent things that you have learned, it doesn't really translate to a specific scenario, what that's going to be like, right? So it might be that you are a person that can pick up a book and you can read through it, and then you can imagine implementing it in your head, and there it goes. Your co-parent may not learn like that. Your co-parent may need more examples, right? They may need support in different ways. They may need more interaction, right? They may need
might need scripts.
They may need. I mean, I've met plenty of people at this point that do really well creating a video, right, of themselves using the scale or little things like that we don't think about. Maybe if you're an educator, that would be top of your list to consider. How do I learn versus how does my co-parent learn? But that's not most of us. And even in that situation, we don't always bring our profession into our personal lives, right?
I mean, right. I mean, how many of you listening in are therapists and you say to your spouse, I'm not your therapist, right? Because we need to be able to turn our heads off. And obviously in this dynamic and how we coach clients, we're not your therapist either, right? But we are trained therapists, many of us here on the team, Autumn and I included. And the whole concept of understanding that it's not your job to be the parent coach to your spouse or co-parent creates this power dynamic and this power differential that can actually really significantly damage the relationship, or at least put serious pressure on it, right? Because you both went into the decision to make kids, have kids, bring children into your world, welcome them into your family, however that happened. And in that decision, that's a mutual decision. And so when it's a mutual decision to parent them, then there's a mutual level of responsibility to do the same thing, whether you want to or not, whether you say, you're the one who's going to work outside the home, I'm going to work inside the home. We've seen it all, guys. It doesn't matter. It is extremely rare for children to benefit effectively, to have parents have such a divisive level of division of responsibility. And you know that, which is why your spouse or co-parent takes on the parenting when they come home from working outside the home, if that's relevant here, or you, same thing, right? Because you both decided to have kids, you both want a relationship with these children. And as a result, you need to be a parent. And so that dynamic of you being in charge of your spouse or co-parent and how they learn really unevens the playing field. And it unevens the level of responsibility and unevens the level of expertise. And that puts a significant strain on the relationship if it's an intimate one, marriage, co-parent, coexisting relationship. When, in that respect, even for divorced families, single parents we work with all the time as well, there's communication that needs to happen. There's, logistics that need to happen. And if one parent has a higher level of understanding than the other, then that top-down process really puts a huge damper into the dynamic, right? You could divide responsibility to taking out the trash, but you cannot divide and doing the laundry, right? Like, you can do that, but you can't divide responsibility and put parenting onto one person's plate if you're going to stay together or work together. And so when we think about that, the incredible component of why this is important is, we hear from parents occasionally who say, I want to talk to you, Megan, or I want to talk to the team, whoever will take the initial phone call, and I'm going to relay all the information that you spend to, talking to us on the phone, to my spouse or co-parent. This is the exact reason why we speak to both parents on the phone if you're living in the same household under the same roof, because that trap is not something we're willing to perpetuate. With that being said, it's something that's pervasive. I mean, oh my goodness, in the mental health world and parenting, parent coach world, and it's fine. It works just fine for parents of non-highly sensitive kids. But for parents of highly sensitive kids, consistency is incredibly important. You have to be both doubling down on the level of commitment and time that you're putting into place to shift this dynamic when your highly sensitive children are stuck in the meltdown cycle, right? If you're parenting a highly sensitive kid and you're listening in, you're like, yeah, my kid, manages their emotions at school, comes home, is good, demonstrates leadership skills in gymnastics, and then tells me when they're upset and asks for hugs. Great, more power to you. Keep listening to keep any of these challenges at bay. But if you're having the daily meltdown cycle happening in your household, it's gotten to the level at this point where you need to be doing things the way that we talk about it, because nobody else knows how to break out of this cycle. And so the additional frustration of trying to teach on top of trying to parent is really it's exhausting. It's exhausting.
The other side to this too is the other side of the parent that's trying to learn and is trying to come home, relax, enjoy time with the family, even if it's a stressful time because of meltdowns or because of just the dysregulation. And now we've got the added stressor of potentially, struggling with, am I being assessed by my teacher in the background? Right?
Should I do a good job? Do I get a gold star? It's like, no, you don't get a gold star. Like, this is your job. I'm not going to give you a gold star for this.
Yeah. That doesn't sound like a great night. And,
exactly. Oh my gosh. Right.
So for, when we think about solving this problem, this is part of this is part of the problem that can't be removed, right? It's not just about your child in the meltdown cycle. It's also about how collaboration between parents can decrease stress in the household, right? Can increase joy, right? Or a sense of togetherness, right? Connection between you and your spouse in doing this journey together, not one-upping the other, but both of you working with someone that is able to, I like the way you said it earlier, take that neutral stance, right? Someone that's able to just notice, this is what you are doing that's complementing what the other person is doing. Here's where you guys can get together to improve a little bit more in X skill or X way that you are assisting your child in the moments that they really need you the most, so that you two aren't unintentionally, coming in and contradicting each other in a way that's just going to create more stress.
Yeah. And overcompensating for each other as well. For sure.
Yeah. And at the same time thinking, I thought I was doing it right.
Yeah.
Right. Because maybe there was a misinterpretation around, you explained this to me. This is how I heard you.
Exactly. For sure. Especially if you're like, you need to go talk to them like this right this minute. And if that parent is stressed out, I mean, they're not emotionally available for learning either. They're going to take like 3 words. Okay, got it. See ya. And you're like, wait a minute, let me lecture you 6 chapters in 10 minutes before you go talk to the kid, right? What's going on, right? So oftentimes we see parents who are stuck in the heat of the moment, trying to relay important information, get each other on the same page at the same time that the child's melting down, or at the same time that at the end of the night when you guys are wiped out, like, what did we do wrong? Where is the conversation you have at night? Again, like Autumn was talking about, I mean, that is not a setup for success for a married couple at all, or, a couple who's coupled. And the dynamic there is just simply not something that you can perpetuate over time. Otherwise, it's just going to be, a lot of long bridges between the two of you, right? You're not really working together. And so when we think about that dynamic and the frustrations that can arise, I want to notice what's possible when we put the system together, right? So I'm going to take one of our clients, and this is the family where both parents are actually divorced. And they came to us managing their 5-year-old, and he was having significant meltdowns in both houses. And they realized, after working on this themselves, that they needed to be able to follow through together, and they co-parented well. Just realized that they were better off not together for the rest of their lives, right? And so in terms of the communication worked well. They were talking to each other, right? And just needed support. And so this little boy would move from both houses and be able to be consistent now that they were speaking the same language. And so they were able to break out of that cycle consistently once they realized how they were overcompensating for each other and sabotaging each other, right? I probably should have I didn't prepare you, Autumn, for who I'm talking about, but mom's first name starts with an E, kiddo's name starts with a G. You're nodding, you know who I'm talking about?
I think I do know who you're talking about here.
Yeah. And since we're recording this, I'm not going to pause the recording to let you know what we're talking about. But in this dynamic, the family came in where there was still a power differential. Mom seemed to kind of get more of this. Dad learned through our work together that he's highly sensitive. So he started to own more of his interactions, own more of his expertise in understanding how his son thought and worked and processed the world, because he didn't have any understanding that his son was like him, because his ex-wife was so aligned to how their son was experiencing the world. It just seemed like she got it faster. And so once we helped him understand that there's actually a lot of similarities in how he's experiencing the world, and how he used to experience the world as a child, and then how their son was, then they started to become even more consistent in the home. Some of the institutions, in routine, were able to play out in both households. Some of the reasons behind the necessity of that were much more effectively understood, right? And the handoff between both houses became much easier. And so and this little boy came in with negative self-talk. I'm a bad kid, right? And this is something that you can see with parents who are divorced or separated. Children start to wonder, is this my fault? And both parents were able to support their child not only break out of that pattern, right? And realize that, and understand and raise his self-concept, raise his self-esteem, but also have the conversation at a different level around their separation and their decision to separate, and that's going to be a transition for this kiddo for the rest of his life, something that he'll have to, at different developmental stages, get used to in different ways. And the certainty that we've got you, buddy, even though we live in 2 different houses, was incredibly valuable for this family to be able to develop. These parents were able to develop. I mean, especially in a divorced household, right? Either parent dropping kiddo off at the other parent's household. This is your baby, right? And so you want to be able to know that you can trust that co-parenting relationship can, and the consistency that you're building in your own home can be managed in the other parent's household. And so that's really the ideal situation of practicing in this. So, many people will go to our results page, they'll see, our marriage has improved, right? It's a positive symptom of breaking out of the meltdown cycle. Is you positive side effect, you get to talk to each other on the same page or speaking the same language, right? But I like to highlight these examples of divorced parents who have separated or who are no longer together. And your child needs that one household to be cohesive, right? So our other client, Megan, she and her wife were not on the same page and really not on very good terms upon their separation and subsequent divorce. And Megan changed things in her household, which actually impacted her ex's perception of the children and their capacities. And that changed her ability to shift out of this dynamic, even when Megan wasn't. I mean, it wasn't a good fit for Megan to teach her ex anything. That was just not a power differential that was going to be even conceptualized, given the the challenges in their relationship. And yet Megan worked with us and she was able to shift this dynamic, and the consistency was built in one household, and the children were able to then build those skills. This is what we talk about. Your child needs one household where there's consistency to build emotion regulation skills, generalize those into other avenues, including a co-parent who didn't work with us, including the house of a co-parent, including, school, obviously, other avenues. This kiddo did a lot of after school sports. And her 3 children were able to shift out of that dynamic. And then that obviously improved the co-parenting relationship too. So I want to highlight the dynamics. A lot of people will say, oh, that's great for parents who go home together and work together and collaborate together, but what about me? And so this parent was able to shift the dynamic and the consistency within her own home, and that implemented the capacity for her children to then generalize their skills into their co-parent's home, into their home, her co-parent's home, their other home. And that co-parent didn't work with us. And it's important to understand that this dynamic it requires one household to be consistent. Okay. And we talk a lot about and might infer that that this problem is most ideally solved in a 2-parent household or whatever. And I think it's really important to make sure that we're covering the fact that we need one household to be consistent. And so if there are 2 parents in that household, then we got to talk to both of you. We got to work with both of you, et cetera. But if there's 2 households, then there's some pretty key factors that consistency and predictability can be built within just one home that can then carry itself over to the other. And so I wanted to just name that, obviously this is part 1. We're going to talk about part 2, how this applies to parents of teens, the difference once your child ages into adolescence, and we'll do that on our next show. So in the meantime, make sure that you go ahead and register for our free training for, parents of highly sensitive kids. Go to meganthompsoncoaching.com/5 steps to break out of this pattern, this meltdown cycle. And we talk more about what actually takes in that free training for you. If you're parenting a teen, you're listening about this and wanting to know more, then definitely stay tuned for part 2. We'll post that next week. And in the meantime, go to meganthompsoncoaching.com/5 steps_teen. Okay. So that you're following through on what we teach related to once your child gets into high school age. All right. Thank you very much for listening. We look forward to talking to you soon.
Have a great day, everybody.